They believed that students and then other groups were the revolutionary subjects. So SDS, the Students for Democratic Society, came into being in 1960 and was prior to then the youth section of a labor organization. Through its short lifespan of 9 years, SDS went through radical transformations that in many ways mirror a teenager's search for identity, like an edgy teen search for identity. To understand how SDS disintegrated, we have to look at the historical context, the soil from which emerged the post-war historical context of post-war America, a period in which the US population rose by around a quarter, but also, largely because of the GI Bill, college enrollment nearly quadrupled. By that time, capitalism had revealed through a century of hard-fought labor, social, and civil rights victories, a testament to its dynamically stubborn nature. Out of this, and with the rapid rise of technology and evolving social paradigms, came new theories of class struggle and revolution. In this regard, not one man was more influential in the development of new leftist theory of the new capitalism than critical theorist Herbert Marcuse, who, fun fact, happened to teach at UT. The seminal text, The One-Dimensional Man, saw a new capitalism as capable of satisfying an increasing number of needs for an increasing portion of the population. As a result, the industrial working class in America, in Marcuse's view, would not be moved in a revolutionary direction. The new revolutionary subjects, according to Marcuse, were those whose privilege, or even lack thereof, endowed them with a radical vision of society. In other words, privileged students, professional workers, as much as black, queer, and traditionally oppressed groups, would have to pick up the mantle of catalyzing revolution, not the working class. You can see why he believed this, because during that period, and for the first time in America, college students outnumbered farmers. But although you might get a sense for why that is true, and you have the Vietnam War happening, and imperialism taking on a new stage and a new phase, his conclusions weren't exactly accurate, in my opinion. Similarly, the revolutions in Cuba and China persuaded thousands of new leftists that guerrilla struggles from below were a viable path to change. We can see how ideologically SDS had begun to drift away from the labor movement from which it came, a drift that would materialize in the form of its remarkable opposition to the Vietnam War. At its height, SDS, I believe, grew to upwards of 200 chapters and maybe even like 100,000 students. And it was mainly because of the war in Vietnam, its opposition to the war in Vietnam, which is something that characterized it. Its opposition to the Vietnam War also alienated it from unions. Unions at that time remained viciously opposed to anti-war organizing out of both deep anti-communist sentiment and a steadfast allegiance to President Johnson's administration. Taking all of this together, we can see how SDS was cast to wander further and further to the left, substituting students, black revolutionaries, and finally third world guerrillas for the working class. Organizationally, SDS was starting to splinter. The national organization began to be undermined by radical posture and attacks to the central office. At the end, SDS fragmented into a number of different, isolated, sectarian organizations, none of which accomplished anything. Our movement today must learn from their failures and successes, how they managed to group hundreds of thousands and build hundreds of chapters, but despite their best efforts, it failed to connect the student movement to labor and social insurgencies. Now, I just want to say one thing, it wasn't just the fault of the students. The olds also, didn't know how to deal with the new capitalism, with the radicalism that was coming out of imperialism. Althusser sees this when he's talking about the reason student revolutionaries in May 1968 sort of tried to make their own way. He says, quoting Lenin, I can't remember the quote right now, but basically he says that there needs to be patience on behalf of the more seasoned organizers with younger organizers, that instead of trying to fight them, they should try to persuade them. And that really wasn't seen in the history of SDS. I don't want to go into it because I don't know how many old SDS members there are here, but yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so I think one thing that's also interesting, we talk about SDS, we talk about May 68, but since then, part of a historical conjunction was the birth of neoliberalism. I think one thing that we should also take note of is that pre-neoliberalism, a lot of people were, things like education were seen more so as like something you invest in for yourself. It's a good thing to go through. It helps you advance in life. But of course, the logic of neoliberalism turned that on its head and said, no, we're going to do things based on individual maximization of potential, returning back to the laissez-faire economics that capitalism was founded on. And I think one thing that's been so interesting in UK in 2010, in Quebec in 2012, and in Chile in 2013, we've seen the rejection of the neoliberal consensus and the rejection of the logic of capitalism that we have to go to education to not only maximize ourselves, but also in a way that makes us very precarious in society, and we have to go through other struggles as well. So going off of that, we're going to go in chronological order and talk about each of our students. Do you want to go first? Okay.
Okay, hi everyone, my name is Camille. I'm from Montreal, but I was born and raised in Quebec City. I was involved with the student movement in Quebec from 2011 until late 2015. I'm now involved with Québec Solidaire, and I work as a union rep in Montreal. So I just want to do like a brief history of the student movement in Quebec so you can understand what we did for the past years prior to 2012. It wasn't magic what happened, it was just loads and loads and loads of work. In Canada, people tend to think that we're super lucky, and there's no such thing as luck with what happened in Quebec over the years. No one gave us this education system. We just fought for it, and we're still fighting to maintain these rights we acquired over the years in Quebec. So our education system is quite different, and really also it's going to help you to understand how the student movement came to be in Quebec. So we go to high school until we're 17, and then we go to Cégep. Cégep is this institution that's between high school and university. It was founded in the 60s in the province of Quebec, and the goal of Cégep it was to make education more accessible for French Canadian. So it's super cheap. You can go there for 2 years or 3 years, whether you want to do a technical program or go to university after. But it was really at the core of what we wanted superior education to be in Quebec, and to make it more accessible. And then you go to university where you do a bachelor's or a master's or different programs. The student movement in Quebec started in the mid-50s. And an important part of what happened with the student unions is that we were legalized and recognized by law in 1983. And what that did is that we now have an automatic checkup. So we have a formula that's based on Canadian labor law. So student unions are recognized, but we also receive money from every single student that enrolls in a school, and they're automatic members of the student union on their campuses or their programs. So we just get everyone, and it's an automatic membership, and that also has been really important in the labor movement in Quebec and in Canada to maintain strong unions in all over the workplaces. We have a long history also of strikes in Quebec. We had strikes in 68, 74, 88, 90, 2005, 2007, and 2012, and 2015. So there has been a long history of strikes. And there's always been this tension within the student movement between the more lobbying, consultationist branch of the student movement and the combative unionism of ASSE, the organization that I was a part of. Mainly we have different ways of interacting with the state. I would say we aim to maintain at ASSE a permanent rapport de force, we call it in French, so a balance of power against the government, while the other student unions are mostly trying to brush shoulders with people in power. So this has created a strong unionist, student union in ASSE, and we really never had a seat at the table before 2012. ASSE was in a legitimate student union. People were saying these are just the radicals, and we're not going to even take them in consideration. We weren't even asked by the labor unions to talk about our struggles. The other unions, they didn't even recognize okay, they were saying we were too radical because we were gearing towards free education and free college. But we decided to keep on going for our principles, and even when the state started asking us and inviting us to these like consultations and everything they were doing, we kept on doing what we were doing for the past few years. Like, should we actually go? Like, what do we gain from meeting with the government, with elected officials? Like, do we legitimize this state, or do we stay in the streets? And most of the time, like, we did both, actually, because diversity of tactics is crucial to the student movement, and it's crucial, like, to ASSE and how it came to be in the past few years. So, ASSE, as an organization, was founded in 2001, and our core principle is the fight for free education for everyone, from kindergarten to PhD, because we believe that you shouldn't have to pay for the right to learn. That's just crazy. And the core of our action is just mass mobilization. And there's also like a really important document that I think like you all should go read. It's called the Grenoble Charter. It was written in 1946 in France after the Second World War, and it practically laid the foundation of student unionism. And ASSE based a lot of their principles on that same document. And it literally says that we as students were intellectual workers, and this is why we need to regroup within unions, and we need to ask for rights. We're not just paying people going to classes, we're workers. So we decided to approach our struggle with like 7 different principles. So quality, free, non-discriminatory, accessible public education, adequate financial aid, and aiming to eliminate student debt. Public education network, which is free from all private sector intrusion. Democratization of educational institution in a perspective of self-management. Union solidarity with all the international progressive minds against all forms of globalization that support predominance of profit over people. And last but not least, for a combative feminism aiming to abolish patriarchy and all forms of oppression. And on the side note, I want to say that this is a really important principle within all socialist organization. I'm really impressed by the level of the political discourse you guys have right now. I wasn't able to quote or even understand Marx when I was 18. I didn't get all of this, but I think it's really important to have this kind of political analysis within our movement. It's necessary, but solidarity also manifests in really different ways, whether it's doing super political research. We need the theory, but we also need actions. Solidarity is also offering a family that has kids to take care of their kids while they go through a protest. It's cooking for teacher unions that don't strike. All forms of organizing are really precious, valid, and necessary for socialism. So the strike in 2012 came to be in Quebec because we knew it was a possibility for years, and it was always in the air. When you have neoliberal government, you obviously know something is going to happen. So we started to develop a discourse not only on the hike, because that was what happened, the government announced there would be a hike in tuition fee, but a broad political discourse on public finances, cut to public services. And I think it's a strength and a weakness to the movement, because we're fighting against a hike of $1,625, and I don't know, I'm saying this and you're all $1,000, are you fucking kidding me? But we were not only fighting against numbers, we're fighting against the ideology in general, against capitalism. It's just not only dollars, it's really a bigger enemy than that. So we started organizing by having one basic principle, which is direct democracy and bottom-up organizing. So we formed a broad coalition, which at the biggest moment we had 65 local student unions that were members, and we had almost 100,000 member at some point representing students at ASSE. It was almost a quarter of the total student population in Quebec, which is a lot of people. So we had a plan that was basically an escalation of tactics and actions, and the unlimited general strike was the final one. So for months and months and months, we just did everything from like going to government meetings, shutting them down, blocking like entries to buildings, and doing one-day strike, and like there were like so many things we did in the months upcoming to the strike. And in November of 2011, we held a one-day strike where 200,000 students, so which is half of the student population in Quebec, went on strike for one day, giving an ultimatum to the government, telling them like, if you keep on going with that, like we're gonna be in your way, and like we're gonna fight for this. And so after that, well, they didn't change their mind, like they just kept on doing what they were doing. And so we just went on strike in February. We started like with not a lot of people on strike, but we were super organized because we've been doing tours of the whole province for months leading up to this special day. So we had a calendar, like this place is going to go on strike first, and that one second, and that one third. And we had a huge team of organizers all over the place going to help everyone with their general assemblies and the voting process. Like the national organization, actually like hired, like they weren't paid, but like they had volunteers all over the province helping people to organize their local assemblies, and that was critical in having everyone on the same page about the strike. So it started in February, and as you can guess, in Quebec it's pretty cold in February.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And it lasted over 6 months. And at the height of the movement, we had over 80% of the total Quebec student population on strike. Whoa. Yeah. And we maintained the strike for months and months and months. And honestly, when it started, no one believed it would go farther than like 3 weeks or a month. And after 3 months, well, we kept going and going and going and going. So every single week during the strike, we had a congress of all of the local unions on a Saturday. It was a moving congress all over the province. And the local student unions had the power to decide basically anything you wanted to propose, you could do it. If you were a local union saying like is somewhere like 8 hours away from Montreal, and you wanted to organize a protest like somewhere, or like you wanted support for this and that, you could propose it to the Congress and people could vote on that and just decide to support you. So we had like, everyone was included in the movement, no matter where you came from, no matter if you were a cégep, university, no matter all you were, like you had a chance and you had a seat at the table and a voice. And this is why direct democracy is super important to understanding the Quebec movement. And it was really hard at first to explain to the general public how we could actually do like general assemblies with thousands of people and vote on a strike. People were just astonished, like students actually gathered together and like talk for hours and debate on how and why we should continue the strike. And they tried to attack us like so many times, like the media, like the right pundits, like everyone. They were saying it wasn't democratic, it wasn't right, it was rigged, and whatever they were saying, like they tried to destroy us for months and months and months and months. But we had internal legitimacy, and like that was all that was important to continue the movement. Is that when the members believe in the process, when all the unions are on the same page, and when you feel you have the power to decide something. Like no matter what happens on the outside, like this is the people that are voting for the strike. These are the people that have voted you also as elected officials. So you need to keep on going no matter what. And the important part about the strike and what we saw was really a shift at some point after a few months. One of the things I think we said the most during that strike is a student strike, but a mass struggle. So even though we were the ones like voting the strike every single week, we were the ones going on picket lines and blocking all the classes. Because when you go on a strike, it's like no one goes to class, no exams are happening, nothing is happening on campus except strike activities. And that took a lot of organization too. But at some point, the government decided to vote a special law, which basically forbid anyone to holding a protest anywhere in the street, like over the province. It was a special law. And that's when we saw a critical change in the political discourse, and it started to be really a mass struggle. So we had people from all over the world supporting us, like Amnesty International. We had like people like sending donations and help and like lawyers and everything. And it's also when like the population started to being really a part of the movement. Some random guy in Montreal decided to create a Facebook event calling for people who disagreed with the law that they should go on their balcony and hold like a pot and a pen and a wooden spoon and just like do that and that and like tap on your pot and your pen like if you were angry. And it created like a movement that I've never experienced anywhere else. It was solidarity like all over the streets. You would like go out of your apartment at night and you would just hear these sounds like all over the province, and it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced. And that's when we started to have also like a real social movement. People in the neighborhoods starting to do like local assemblies in the parks, in the plazas, like everywhere. You had like people doing like protests in their own neighborhoods, not going to the national one. People really like starting to appropriate themselves this movement that was against a hype, but for just a better future and for free education. And it was amazing what happened, but it would have been possible if we didn't have a strong core organization, and I think it's really important to all social movements. I'll just go really quick talking about the relation with labor unions. At first, they weren't behind us at all. Like at all. Like we had like to show up places and ask for a mic to talk about our struggle in the upcoming strike, because union leaderships, they wanted nothing to do with us. We were too radical, it wouldn't happen, blah blah blah, like the same usual thing. And they were also ready like to throw us under the bus because they wanted us to condone violence, which we didn't want to do. And that was the whole story. But when we reached out to like the local members and like the chapters of like every single union, we actually inspired them to go up to their union leadership and take a new position on free education and change the way they were acting within their own union. So, and I think that's a socialist prerogative, just intervene everywhere, just take up the mic, like show up everywhere in meetings, go like to local unions. And it's important to see like every place as somewhere you can organize too. Like if you have a shitty job, like unionize your workplace. Like I did that. I was a bartender and it was the worst job I've ever had, and we decided to unionize my workplace, and it was amazing after that. And all my colleagues went on to unionize their other workplaces, and now we're just a network of new restaurants and bars that are all unionized in Montreal. And the other thing I want to point out before we go on to Britain is that yeah, like we technically won after 6 months. Like the hype was stopped, the law that was forbidding us to protest was repealed. But we managed also to change public opinion about a lot of things and bring subjects we didn't even talk about before the student strike happened. ASSE was the first big organization to talk about austerity. Like we bought the web domain in 2013, and we started to a campaign on what austerity meant in Quebec, and people were looking at us saying like, what is it you're doing? Austerity doesn't exist. This is not like Spain, this is not Portugal, this is not Europe. Like there's no austerity happening right now in Quebec. And guess what? A couple years later, no one even is contesting that this is taking place right now. So they're gonna tell you you're crazy, then they're gonna side with you and fight with you and be with you in the street, that's for sure. And I think it's really important also in what you can gain from organizing within student unions, and what the strike told us, that the greatest legacy, at least for me, was that young people realize the power they have when they work together. If you look at the people around you, like sitting at your tables, like I'm with the same people and comrades, and they eventually became family. And people like that were there in 2011 will still organizing together, like up to this day, like 8 years later. We're not students anymore, but we're all super involved, whether it is local unions or Québec Solidaire. Québec Solidaire had only 1 seat in 2012 when the strike was happening, and this past election in October, we have like 10 seats seats right now, which is really impressive. Like, we did this by keep on organizing and learning lessons from spring 2012 and applying that to a political party. And I could go on and on about this and talk a lot about how Quebec has now managed to do that. But the thing is that student leaders and organizers invested this political party and made it their own and just took over some of the structures and like also putting, I think, hope in the head of people and like making them realize like this is possible, you can actually win a struggle, and showing that to older people, especially that have been involved with a political party for years and years and years. It was kind of hard, but we did it, and now we have 10 elected officials at the National Assembly, and I think next election we'll probably get 20 and 25 and up to 125, and we're going to have power one day.
I will speak about Britain, and I think many of you here know a man called Jeremy Corbyn. Leader of the Labour Party, elected a number of times with huge majorities, unprecedented majorities in the history of the Labour Party. And I think to understand why Jeremy Corbyn was elected, why 78% of young people with under 25 voted for him at the last general election, we need to go back to 2010, we need to go back to the foundations on which this project was built, and that's built by activists, by student activists who paved the way. To understand the revolution that Jeremy Corbyn has made inside the Labour Party, I think one has to realise how different the Labour Party was before then. Jeremy Corbyn was an isolated individual, possibly one of only a handful of people, along with John McDonnell, his shadow chancellor, who stuck it out through the 1980s, the 1990s, 2000s. He was the most rebellious MP in Parliament, voting against almost all of the bad legislation put in, including the increase of tuition fees, not only once, but twice by the Labour government, and the commissioning of a report, the Brown Review, that advocated, which was then used to justify the tripling of tuition fees to £9,000, about $12,000 per year, an average course of three or 4 years, meaning that students now go out with £50,000 worth of debt, which is an extraordinary amount, with no grants to cover the cost we have to take out by loans. The Labour Party brought in all these reforms to education and set up enough marketisation, and every single step was opposed by Jeremy Corbyn. And in 2010, students felt totally betrayed by all of the political parties. One has to imagine that all three major parties had betrayed their promises to young people, especially the Liberal Democrat Party, which had opposed tuition fees, opposed the Iraq War, opposed ID cards, and a lot of students in 2010 had backed as an alternative to Labour, who had seen as being culpable for deaths in Iraq, for the tuition fees, for the general disenchantment with politics in general. That betrayal is crucial to understand 2010, and crucial to understand why Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell were seen as so principled by young people today. 2010 started with an unforgettable, I know you weren't there, but an unforgettable day on November the 11th, 2010, where a demonstration of 50,000 students, the largest demonstration of British students in at least in a generation since at least the 1970s, was marching past the Conservative Party headquarters, the ruling party's headquarters. And unexpected, someone with a banner turned the banner around, moved the demonstration, instead of going to hear the speeches, went and occupied the front courtyard of the ruling party's headquarters, and by a twist of fate, someone kicks a window and the window disintegrates, and by some magic this protest becomes this festival of almost liberation. The ruling party's headquarters is taken over.